It's April 12th, 2019.
This is Nerd Bourbon episode 97. I'm Big Daddy.
And I don't even know where I was going to go with that. If I was going to jump in.
Your little sister, don't you know?
Little sister. I don't want to be little sister.
Your little sister, Todd. Todd, I have one thing to say to you before we begin this episode.
Welcome to the Circus of Value.
Todd, we are gathered here today. I'm very excited about this. So we're doing...
What are you about to start a sermon?
Yeah, I feel like it. No, but we're gathered here today recording an evergreen episode because as you're listening to this, I'm in Chicago right now.
Balls deep.
Yeah, balls deep. Having a grand old time, eating all the pizza, eating all the hot dogs, enjoying all of the homeless people that I can.
Oh, and you definitely will.
So we decided, we've done this before. Whenever something comes up or, I'm going out of town or I'm getting married, we have had this practice of kind of delivering an evergreen episode that will sort of serve as a kind of stamp in time. You guys don't have to miss a week of Nerd Bourbon. You guys still get an episode to listen to. But we are doing something a little bit different this time. With episode 97, we are actually doing... I kind of pitched this idea to Todd, and he liked it. Something we've never done before. A video game retrospective episode. Where we do an entire episode just sort of focusing in on one video game that we both really like. Mm-hmm. And if you haven't pieced it together yet, this one, our first ever video game retrospective, is going to be on Bioshock. I think Bioshock is probably, if I'm thinking about it, I know at one point we did like our top 10 favorite games of all time, and I know Bioshock was on there for me. But it's just one of those games that like stands the test of time for me. Like, I've probably played the first Bioshock, and I do want to be clear, we are talking about the first Bioshock. We could have done the entire series, but I didn't want to go that far. I wanted to really hone in and just make a sort of archival tome of our love for the first Bioshock game specifically. And I just, I probably played that game 10 plus times. And it's just, I even played it recently when it came to PS4. I platinumed the game again. And I just really, really have such a deep love for that game. What do you think, when you think back to the first Bioshock, just hit me with some memories. What are some things that stand out to you?
Oh shit! I mean, the one that always sticks out to me is the first moment with a big daddy and a little sister.
Of course, when you're behind that glass.
Oh yeah.
And you just have to watch after dropping down from the catwalk. And there's a splicer coming up on the little sister, right? And he kind of sees her and he thinks she's alone. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. We should know. I don't think we've ever said this on the podcast. This has happened a few times during our relationship, but Bioshock was a game that I forced you to play.
Yes, it was.
I forced you to play it. And what I mean by that is, I think I literally was like, it had been out for a little while, and I kept singing its praises, and for some reason, and I think you do this on purpose, you're just like, nah, fuck it. I think it's gonna be lame. I don't think I'm gonna like it. Whatever. Because you do this all the time, and I've never steered you wrong, but you continue to do it, and I think you do it on purpose. I really do.
I do.
Because it's gonna be good.
I won't deny it.
It's gonna be good. If I'm recommending it, it's gonna be good. So
lies.
So Bioshock had already been out for a little while, and I was already obsessed with it. Because I bought the game when it first came out. I'll talk about that actually in a second. But, I was already obsessed with the game, and I kept telling Todd, like, you have to play it. And I think it was already down to, like, $20 by the time you finally played it. Because I remember buying, like, a 1,600 Microsoft point card.
That's a weird thing. Do you remember Microsoft points?
Yeah, Microsoft points. I bought, like, a 1,600 Microsoft point card or whatever it was, which equated to, $20. in Space Bucks, and I was like, here, like, redeem this code, get your Microsoft points, and buy a copy of Bioshock.
I remember. I think I made a joke. What are you gonna do if I don't?
Yeah, I was like, then the next thing I'm buying is a plane ticket. And I'm gonna go up there and beat your fucking ass. No, but you did. You bought Bioshock with with the points that I gave you, and you played it and you enjoyed it.
It's all right. No, I'm just playing.
I just want so over the years, I mean, have you ever had a chance to replay Bioshock? Have you only ever played it
Yeah,
once?
I've replayed it like one more time.
Yeah. I'll never forget. So the first Bioshock, it came out August 21st, 2007. So the game is approaching its 12th birthday. And I will never forget when this happened. I was actually up in Chicago at the time, staying with my grandma and grandpa Borgini. And my grandpa was not in good health at this time, so we were actually supposed to be home when Bioshock came out. I had a pre-order on it at GameStop and everything. And we were supposed to be home by the time it came out. But as it turned out, I think I was like, 12 years ago, I would have been 16. So we're supposed to be home. And lo and behold, I would actually begin working at that GameStop just a couple of months later. But thinking back to it, my grandpa was in bad health. We ended up staying in Chicago for an extra 2 weeks or something like that. And I ended up just picking up my copy of Bioshock while I was up there. Because it wasn't, what am I going to do, not play Bioshock? I was so hyped for it. Luckily, one of my little cousins, my little cousin Matt, luckily had a 360. And I was like, look, you can watch me play this game, but you got to let me play it. Kind of thing. Like, you can watch me play this. This is a brand new video game. And it's really cool. And he was like, he's younger than me, looked up to me and stuff like that. I was like, you can watch me play this, but you're going to have to, be quiet and let me play this kind of thing. So it was me and my little cousin Matt just sitting and just chilling and just playing Bioshock. And I just, man, I'll never forget that. I really, and it wasn't even on, a great TV. I think he just had a shitty little TV, but it was good enough for me, man. As long as I got to play it. Mm-hmm. And my first real memory of Bioshock, and a lot of people have this memory with it, is so the game begins with a plane crash. And I'll talk about the story of the game and stuff like that. It should be said that this is going to be I'm not going to hold back on any spoilers. The game is fucking 12 years old. It's a retrospective podcast. I'm not going to hold back on spoiler talk. I'm going to fully spoil this game. Because this is the kind of game that you can't really talk about without spoiling it. But the game begins with a plane crash, and you crash into the Atlantic Ocean. And when the game gives you control, there's no cut from the cutscene to the gameplay. And so the game looks so good at the time, and the water was so realistic, that I literally didn't think the cutscene was over yet. You're sitting there floating in the water with the crashed plane and sticking out of the water, and you see the iconic, lighthouse in the distance. And I literally thought that there was the only reason that I grabbed my controller and began to move my character is because I literally thought that the cutscene had glitched and it was still going on. And I'm like, is something wrong? So let me pick up the controller and try to hit some buttons or whatever. And then I realized that no, it's gameplay. I mean, the game looked that good, especially for the time. I mean, it still looks good.
Bioshock's one of those games that has aged very, very well. I don't care.
And it's a strength of the game's art direction. It has this beautiful sort of destroyed Art Deco art direction that is wonderful, and and again, just the fidelity, even the water specifically. I remember reading before the game came out, in Game Informer or whatever it was I was reading at the time. They spent so much time developing the water, had its own physics engine, and the water even today still is some of the best video game water, 12 years on. I mean, that's one thing that you really got to get right when you're talking about a game that's set underwater. So this is something that I've actually struggled with over the years. How would you describe, what genre would you say that Bioshock is?
I mean, it's obviously a shooter, in a way.
Yeah, I mean,
Technically.
there are guns.
Technically. They are guns.
There are guns. It is technically a first-person shooter. But, like, it has so many different, like, on one hand, there's heavy exploration and, like, adventure game, Metroidvania elements. You could argue that it's a horror game. You could argue that it is sort of... I mean, I guess the closest corollary is sort of like... You know, this was built as a spiritual successor to the System Shock games. And when people talk about these games, they refer to them as immersive sims. And, so like Dishonored and Thief are sort of like that kind of systems-heavy games that sort of allow the player freedom of choice in its gameplay and doesn't let the story get in the way of its gameplay. And I guess that's what Bioshock falls under, but like that's sort of one of the brilliant things about it is like Bioshock does have all of those elements of like, you know, it's not, you can call it a first-person shooter, but it actually isn't that combat heavy.
No, it's not really.
Like, the game actually, you could probably literally count all of the enemies that you kill in the game. Like, it's not like you're ever having, like, these massive, like, shootouts with hundreds of splicers. I mean, you maybe go up against, like, I wouldn't say that at any given time you go up against more than, like, 10 splicers at a time.
That sounds about right. Honestly, the biggest shootout that I remember is when you first get the shotgun.
Yes, and that's a great, iconic moment.
I love that shit.
When you first get the shotgun, and the shotgun's in the middle of the room with a single, like, spotlight on it.
You know something's up.
You already know something's weird about it. But when you pick up that shotgun and that one spotlight, the only light in the room, it goes off. And now, boom, you're in the middle of the room, shotgun in hand, no light at all. And then when the light does kind of flicker back on, all you hear are just footsteps and like the sounds of the maniacal splicers running right at you. Oh, it's a great moment. I love that moment in the game.
It's a little terrifying.
And that's what I'm saying. The game, you could kind of argue that it's a bit of a horror game. And there are survival elements to the game, especially, have you ever played the game on like its hardest difficulty?
Oh, fuck no.
If you play that game on its hardest difficulty, like, dude, ammo is like scarce. You really have to be creative. I really enjoy, so, you know, I've platinumed the game multiple times, both on PS3, PS4. I earned all of the achievements on Xbox 360. So I've 100% of the game multiple times, and to do that, you have to play the game through on the hardest difficulty without using a Vita chamber. And I gotta tell you, it requires like such strategy in its gameplay. You have to be so creative. I mean, like, it got to the point where I was literally, like, I would run out of ammo, and all I had was, like, the proximity mines.
Oh, no.
So what I would do is I would literally throw proximity mines and, like, stick them onto, like, a trash can, and then use telekinesis to throw my mined-up trash can at enemies.
The thing is, I have to respect that though, like the ingenuity of what you had to do with like the plasmids, whatever you had.
That's kind of why I love playing the game that way, because it forces you to be like that. And Bioshock Infinite is no different, but we're not talking about Bioshock Infinite today. It is like there's something beautiful about that. Like there's something that I like, but I don't want to get ahead of myself here. I want to set up the story, because I think that the thing that I love Bioshock most, and the thing that, you know, I love the story of the game, I love the characters of the game. I think that the game really excels. To me, the first Bioshock really is almost perfect, where it excels in its storytelling, voice acting, the audio design. We've already talked about the graphics are beautiful, the art is beautiful. In every avenue, Bioshock really just knocks it out of the park, and it is very, very nearly perfect. I have a couple of like minor complaints that I'll get to during the course of this discussion, but I mean, by and large, Bioshock is almost a perfect game to me. Like, it's like a 9.9. You know what I mean? I can almost think of no complaints. And the thing that is so beautiful about the first Bioshock to me is when you're arguing games as art. It's not really a conversation that happens that much anymore, but back when Bioshock first came out, there was definitely a lot of people who were like, games are not art, right?
Yeah, back in like what 2007.
This came out in 2007, yeah. So, I mean, there's a lot of talk, especially like there's the infamous tirade from like Roger Ebert. Don't get me wrong, I love Roger Ebert, but he was like dead wrong. He had a huge tirade about video games are not art and can never be art and blah, blah, blah. And the reason that the beautiful thing about Bioshock is that Bioshock is a story that could not be told in any other medium but video games. The one of the major cruxes, and this is something that we'll definitely talk about later in the discussion, the would you kindly twist. That only works in a video game. That doesn't work as a movie. That doesn't work as a book. And I honestly think that that's the reason the Bioshock movie has never gotten off the ground, is because you can't make a movie that follows the plot of this game because it's only a video game. You can only make it work as a video game. That's what's beautiful about it. That's why when I think of video games as art, this is the first game that comes to my mind. You know what I mean? You know, there are a lot of people who would argue that, like, Shadow of the Colossus, and as a matter of fact...
I was actually going to say that to myself, actually, now.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, Shadow of the Colossus is the game that Ebert played when he made this argument. So he wrote this whole essay about, you know, video games are not art, blah, blah, blah. And so somebody bought him a PlayStation 3, and they bought him the Shadow of the Colossus remake that was out, or the remaster that was out at the time, to play on his PS3. And he played through it, actually. And enjoyed it, but it didn't change his mind.
Yeah, that's whatever. That game is a fucking masterpiece. But back to Bioshock.
Again, he was wrong, right?
Yeah.
But you know, I love Ebert, but he was wrong. And this game, to me, is the chief example of video games as art. This could not have been anything other than a video game. The story. Let's talk about the story of Bioshock, because, God, I cannot think of, in all of video games, maybe in all of fiction, period, a story that is so well considered. There is no question that does not have an answer in Bioshock. What the conception of Rapture and all the characters in it, everything has an answer. Everything has been thought of. There is nothing about it that has not been thought of. So I wrote up a little thing here to sort of describe story bits and to sort of set it up for you. So the game takes place in 1960. You play as a character named Jack. As I said earlier, you begin the game on a plane that crashes near a lighthouse in the North Atlantic Ocean. Jack swims to the lighthouse, and he discovers a bathysphere within the lighthouse that takes him directly to the underwater city of Rapture, in a beautiful scene. One of the best openings in any video game ever.
Still to this day. Yeah.
So fucking good. When you're in this bathysphere and you're seeing this beautiful underwater city lit in front of you, and the voice of Andrew Ryan, you know, kind of describing the ideology behind Rapture. Rapture was constructed in the late 1940s by a man named Andrew Ryan. He's an objectivist, sort of isolationist business magnate who believes that the government gets in the way of, like, great men and women, the sort of societal elite, the sort of like the beautiful people, basically, the creative people, the engineers, the scientists, the artists of the world. He thinks that the government gets in their way, and he wanted to build a utopia for them to flourish unburdened by government. And that's what Rapture was, as an underwater city. And as it developed, a sort of class conflict grows between the lower class workers that were sort of brought into the city. I mean, somebody had to build the city, right? And the people had to work in the city. So there were sort of lower classmen in Rapture. And then the upper class, the sort of, again, the societal elite of Rapture that kind of go into Rapture and do nothing but grow in money and power. And this class warfare that breaks out between the two is taken advantage of by a man named Frank Fontaine, who is a successful Rapture businessman who sort of makes his money by secretly smuggling items into Rapture from the surface, which is something that Andrew Ryan has strictly forbade. He sort of like has all these businesses and all these fronts, and really what he's doing is smuggling things from the surface. And he actually employs a lot of the underclass, a lot of the underclassmen, a lot of the workers of Rapture really respect Frank Fontaine, even though he's kind of like, it's one of those things where he has a lot of businesses, but, you know, he's a criminal. People know he's a criminal, right? Meanwhile, the city, and this is a whole other side thing that plays an important role in Rapture's downfall. The city of Rapture has fallen prey to a drug addiction outbreak, where everybody is just addicted to drugs, basically, as a result of the discovery of a strange substance called Atom. And Atom is a genetic / DNA altering substance that can do many different things. It can make electricity shoot from your fingers. It can make you stronger. It can make you more handsome, etc. But the more people that were taking Atom, the more people were becoming addicted to it.
Mm-hmm.
And they were becoming what was called splicers. Essentially just like drug addicts that were completely gone, right?
What's funny is like it's only now do I respect the enemy name of Splicer.
Yeah, like the gene splicing.
Yeah.
It's brilliant, dude. It's brilliant. They're completely gone. Like the splicers, they're so drug-addled. Just completely gone from humanity and insane, right?
Yeah.
And Frank Fontaine uses the splicers in the lower class, and he basically creates a civil war within Rapture. And he does this on New Year's Eve, 1958. Jack enters 2 years later. And when you arrive playing as Jack, the civil war is over. Almost everyone is dead. Basically, it's just the splicers and a few other people that are alive. It's basically it. You found yourself in this fallen underwater dystopia. Your only point of human contact is a man named Atlas, who is communicating with you over the radio. And that's something that I guess we should talk about, because a point of contention for a lot of people, and me personally, I love this, is that much of the game's story is told via like the radio and audio diaries and environmental storytelling.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't like that, because if you were to skip a lot of the audio diaries, you would miss a lot of the story.
I don't. Here's the thing. In my mind, when I think about that game, like that's the only way it would work. There's nobody. Everybody's dead.
Well, yeah, that is true, but it's also like, and this is something that I wanted to ask you, because especially during this time, I can't imagine you were a very deliberate player. Like, I have to imagine you're pretty much just rushing through the game.
Yeah, it depends. Depends on like I'm trying to think of how I was back then. Nah, for the most part, I found majority of the audio diaries. I mean, it really depends on the type of game that I'm playing.
Yeah.
And where I'll get deliberate or not.
I really think that this game almost requires you to be deliberate, which is, I mean, if you love that sort of thing, then this game is definitely for you. The game is extraordinarily deliberate. Like, there is nothing there that was not put there on purpose. You know what I mean? And like the environmental storytelling is like off the charts. I mean, there's this famous thing that goes around where like you'll run into like skeletons. It'll be a couple that is like huddled together on a couch. You know what I mean?
Yep.
There's one where you find a man's body who is he was a shop owner, and you find his body laying on the ground clinging to his cash register. You know what I mean? And that's the kind of stuff, I mean, that tells, without ever saying a word, that tells a story, right? Mm-hmm. That tells a story of a man who cared about nothing more than his money. You know what I mean? And and even like the loot, even the stuff that you can find on the bodies can tell a story about the people that they belong to. I mean, everything is placed with care. It's probably the most deliberately designed game I've ever played in that respect. And I mean, I can't even imagine what it must have been like to design the game like that. And this game really rewards and encourages you to dig in and get all of the fine details and to just really explore every nook and cranny. It is so deliberate. And I almost like, you're doing a disservice to yourself really if you rush through this game. This game does not this game does not suffer that bullshit. You have to immerse yourself in it, and I love that. I want to talk about the gameplay of Bioshock. There are a lot of people, I'm not one of them, but there are a lot of people who will criticize Bioshock's gameplay, and you know, they think that you can't really consider it a shooter because the shooting doesn't necessarily feel great. I personally think the shooting does feel great.
I don't think the shooting. I mean, the shooting doesn't feel fantastic, but it's passable.
I've never been one of those people. I've never had a problem with the shooting in Bioshock. I think it feels great. Like, I think it feels totally solid. I think there's a satisfying like just the feeling of it. Like, the game just feels good. The frame rate isn't really ever a thing that, that becomes a problem. There's a satisfying, like, kind of head bob effect. There's a nice visceral weight to all of the guns. The melee weapon, the wrench, is like one of my favorite, like, melee weapons in all of video games. It's so good. I love it. That classic 1-2 punch, man, where you do that electric, electro bolt plasmid and then smack him with the wrench.
Oh, it's, and you, like you said, like, everything feels weighty. Oh, dude, hitting motherfuckers with that wrench. I swear.
Yeah, and you just see like a string of blood like leaving their mouth as they fall to the ground.
Mm-hmm.
It's so good. So good. When you're thinking back to some of the weapons and plasmids, what are some favorites? Like, what was your go-to strategy? What was your gameplay style?
Shit, that was my go-to.
Oh, really? Just shocking people and smacking them?
Yep.
The thing about when you play the game on very hard mode, like I was talking about earlier, like, you go through Eve like crazy, especially in the early game. You could maybe get 2 shots of Electro Bolt on a single chart, like on a single thing of Eve before you have to spend a hypo. Like, maybe on a good day, you could use a plasmid twice. Sometimes it was just once. So, yeah, that was a good go-to. I mean, are there any weapons that stand out to you? What was one of your go-to weapons?
I'm trying to think of, like, the weapons right now. Because I know obviously the shotgun was a go-to because I just like shotguns.
Shotgun's always good. Of course, you could upgrade them throughout the course of the game, make them better. Of course, there was like the Tommy gun.
Yep, the Tommy gun.
Had.
There was.
I really liked the the Tommy gun was a real go-to for me.
I like the crossbow.
Yeah, I was just about to say the crossbow was one of my favorites. I really enjoyed it. I liked the idea of the research camera. Not a weapon, but I liked the idea of like taking the pictures and being graded on the pictures and sort of like having an increasing rewards based on how many pictures and the sort of quality of the pictures you take, which will allow you to do more damage to the splicers, or exclusive gene tonics, which are sort of like upgrades and bonuses that you can equip on yourself. And that's the thing, is like that's another thing, is like Bioshock, yeah, you can call it a shooter or a horror game or whatever. It's also a really deep RPG. There are all these gene tonics and like passive upgrades and active upgrades that you can install on yourself and do genetic splicing of your own. And you can really kind of make it build, Like, there are definite builds in Bioshock.
Mm-hmm.
That's something that you don't get with a game that is not an RPG. So Bioshock wears a lot of different genre hats that I really respect.
I'm looking at the plasmids right now, and I kind of know the ones I'm remembering the ones that I actually used.
Oh yeah, which ones did you rock?
I honestly kind of stuck to like the elemental ones. I had like Electro Bolt, Incinerate, and then like Winter Blast.
Yeah, I think it completely depends on. I think it completely depends on some of the way that you're playing the game. So certain plasmids you would almost never use if you're playing the game just like normally. But let me tell you,
yeah,
like the security bullseye and the hypnotize Big Daddy on the higher difficulties, essential, absolutely essential. The hypnotize Big Daddy and everything like that. I mean, it's. And some of these you can only actually get from the Tenenbaum rewards after you rescue the big sisters. Let me ask you that. How did you handle the little sisters? Did you harvest or did you rescue?
I rescued.
Okay. It's the only way to do it, really.
Yeah, I mean, like, I think the first time I harvested and I felt bad.
Because when you harvest the little sisters, God, that's another can of worms. I need to kind of just explain what little sisters are. When you harvest the little sisters, you literally just like they originally in the original version of the game they showed you like killing the little sisters, but now it kind of like fades to black, and then you're just holding a sea slug in your hand when it's all said and done. Yeah, little sisters. So let me describe what these are. So one of the things that you learn in the audio diaries is that there is a doctor. Her name is Dr. Bridget Tenenbaum. And one of the audio diaries follows her as she's in Neptune's Bounty. She sees an injured guy, like fatally injured, and he has a sea slug that is healing his fatal injuries. She sort of researches these sea slugs and realizes that if you implant the slug into the stomach of a human, it produces like way more Adam than the slug itself would normally produce. But for some reason, it only does this and it only works on little girls. So Frank Fontaine, remember we talked about Fontaine earlier, he creates a front of like charity orphanages with these little girls when really he's just putting the sea slugs in all of the little girls' bodies and farming them for Adam. So the Adam market for the common person is so scarce that another character, Dr. Sushang, he creates a way for the little sisters to harvest Adam from dead bodies. So, like, after these Adam junkies would die, these splicers would die, the little sisters would come around with these sort of hypodermic needles, and they would literally harvest Adam from the dead bodies. And as they're doing this, this obviously made the little sisters an easy target for other splicers, so the big daddies were created to protect them, right? And the big daddies were also sort of like, they were lower classmen that were sort of like abducted and drafted into this like big daddy and made into this suit and given like a telepathic link or sort of a psychological link to these little sisters. And I think they even say in one of the audio diaries that originally it was like one big daddy to one little sister, which this is I think revealed in Bioshock 2, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes. Yeah, that's because the prototype.
Exactly.
Big Daddy shit.
The prototype Big Daddy, you're linked to one specific little sister. And they ended up nixing that because they, whenever that little sister dies or whatever, that Big Daddy is totally fucking useless.
Mm-hmm.
So now it's like every Big Daddy is tied to every little sister kind of thing. But yeah, really interesting and really fucked up. Like incredibly fucked up if you think about it. So that's just a little backstory on the little sisters. But yeah, it's the harvest or rescue choice is actually where we come to one of my only complaints with the game, because you do end up getting more Adam ultimately if you rescue the little sisters.
Yeah.
Because you get a little bit of Adam when you rescue them, and it's not so basically the choice is if you harvest them you get a huge hit of Adam all at once. But then if you rescue them, you get a little bit. But here's the thing. Every 3 little sisters you rescue, Tenenbaum, trying to sort of right her past wrongs, she blames herself for sort of like her research on the Atom and her collaboration with Frank Fontaine. She essentially helped in the creation of the little sisters. So she's trying to right the sort of sins of her past. So whenever you rescue them, as a reward, she gives you a sort of like basket. Normally has an exclusive gene tonic, exclusive plasmids even, and a huge bounty of Adam to make up for the fact that you haven't been harvesting them. So,
and it basically makes it to the point where, like, if you're harvesting, you're kind of a jackass, and there's like no point.
Well, and not only is there no point, but there's literally there's no reason to harvest them. Like,
yeah, it
would have been very interesting if there was a legitimate reason to harvest the little sisters. If the difference in Adam was like way more if you harvested them. Like, really tempt me and really make the economy like strenuous. Like, make it so that if I rescue a little sister, I will get such a minuscule amount of Adam. It'll basically just be the amount of Adam to like scrape by. You know what I mean? But if I really want to like get all these plasmids and really enjoy myself and be all powerful, I'm going to have to harvest them. That's what they should have done. Because it ends up sort of feeling like a superfluous choice.
Yeah.
It ends up being like, well, why wouldn't I harvest them? It's the better outcome. It's the way I get the canonical ending of the game. I don't feel like an asshole. And also I get the most Adam and the exclusive gene tonics and plasmids out of it.
Mm-hmm.
So there's quite literally no reason for me to harvest.
There's no negatives to rescuing.
Yeah. And there should be. I think that it would have been a lot more interesting if there was like if it was an actual choice, Because I tell you, like, I did do a run where I harvested the little sisters just to kind of see, like, what happened. and like they make you feel like a total jackass, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And the ending sucks for that one, you know? And like everybody hates you. Like
Mm-hmm.
it's bad, and it would have been really interesting if they played with that a little bit more. So, yeah, that's one kind of minor complaint that I have with the game. I want to talk about some of the characters. What are some of the characters that you remember? Who stands out? What are some moments?
You know the one that stands out. I'm trying to remember his fucking name.
Which one?
Artist boy.
Oh, Sander Cohen?
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Who can forget Sander Cohen? It's awesome.
That motherfucker.
His whole area, Fort Frolic, is probably like... Fort Frolic is one of the like kind of most memorable video game levels ever. Probably.
Mm-hmm.
That's sort of Sander Cohen's whole district of Rapture. Sort of an art district in Rapture. And he sends you to like kill his old proteges, basically, and take pictures of their bodies. And what's interesting, I wonder if you knew this. Did you know that after you sort of help Sander Cohen complete his sort of like display with all the dead bodies of his old proteges or whatever, like if you like at the end there, you don't have to kill him.
Oh, I know that.
Yeah. You don't have to kill him. You could totally let him live. And in fact, if you let him live later on in the game, you run into him when you're in Olympus Heights. He's in his apartment in Olympus Heights, and you can kill him there. And that's the only way you can get access to his room.
Yep.
And you can even take a picture of his body, and you can get a trophy for it called Irony.
I know. I got that.
It's good shit.
Yeah.
But, you know, I got to call back to the very first major character that you run into, Dr. Steinman.
Oh shit! Yeah.
The sort of the surgeon who is just run insane, and if you his audio diaries are so fascinating because if you listen to him, he sort of becomes like because that's the thing is like Rapture is driving people crazy, not even just from the drugs, but I mean think about it, you're trapped underwater, you know.
Oh, yeah, it's like solitary confinement type of shit.
Yeah, and like not only is it the crushing pressure, and not only is it like the isolation, you know, with no contact to the surface. I mean, literally, and this is sort of explained again in Bioshock 2, which is a really underrated game. I really, really love Bioshock 2. But in Bioshock 2, like Andrew Ryan hires a therapist, you know, Sophia Lamb, because people are going fucking nuts. And that's how Steinman is. Steinman is sort of like he starts to muse on the sort of lack of the petty morality of the surface. Now that he's free from the petty morality of the surface, why does somebody have to have two eyes? Why is it that we have to have two arms? Why can't we? Why can't somebody have half a nose? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like what's the why do we have to sort of like abide by the surface societal standards of beauty? You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And it's just this disturbing thing where he's got this like body on his like operating table, and he's just like stabbing into it. He's just like, I want to make her beautiful, but she won't stand still. He's just like it's like blood going everywhere. It's like fuck. It's like a fun fight too, and it's actually really fun because I remember before that fight would begin, I would always like go through all of the healing stations and hack them, because if you hack the healing stations, the AI in this game is so smart they will actually go to the healing stations and try to heal themselves, but if you've hacked them, it'll poison them instead. Oh, it's so good.
You're actually missing like one of my favorite dialogue things actually from that fight.
What does he say?
What's this, goddess? An intruder?
Oh, yeah.
He's ugly.
He's ugly. 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 And then I think that's when he starts, like, opening fire, right?
Yep.
He, like, starts shooting, or he has, like, a turret or something like that, and the glass breaks.
He's just too good.
An intruder. He's ugly. I love it. I love it. There's a bunch of good characters that you come across, and that's sort of the first. The game has like quote unquote boss fights, I guess.
That'd be the first one.
That would be the first, I guess, boss fight. And there's other characters like Peach Wilkins, and you know, there's a few characters that you kind of come to meet. There's a lot of them that you don't come to meet though. There's a lot of characters that only appear in audio diaries.
Yep.
And a lot of characters that you don't learn about. I have a list here of the locations, because one of the things that I think Bioshock 1 did really, really well is all of these locations are like classic video game levels that are all so unique and like so captivating. Because, you know, you start the game in Steinman's sort of area, the medical pavilion, and that already, like that just the intro level dealing with Steinman, like just that's already setting such a creepy tone with this dilapidated medical area. Like,
yep.
And that's the thing is, like, a lot of these splicers that you're seeing, they're wearing masks, and they're wearing masks for two reasons. A, because Steinman has fucked them all up, right? Yep. And B, because it was New Year's Eve, right? So they're wearing masks for the party, you know? So, again, this goes back to what I was saying before, where everything in the game is considered, you know? Everything has an answer. Neptune's Bounty. The fisheries. You know, this is the fishing district in the port, which was a cover for Frank Fontaine's Smuggling. You know, Arcadia, a really unique.
Arcadia is actually my favorite location in the game.
Is it really?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is sort of the botanical garden. This is where they figured out how to supply oxygen to the city,
which is genius. Yeah.
Really, really interesting. Of course, there's a farmer's market. Fort Frolic we've already talked about. Hephaestus. This is where the city provides its power, and it's also where Andrew Ryan's office is located, and that's something that we're gonna have to talk about.
Absolutely respect the name of the location.
Yes. Olympus Heights. This is something that I sort of touched on earlier. So this is actually where it was kind of cool that they let you see, like, how the other half lived. You know.
Mm-hmm.
They give you the opportunity to go to Olympus Heights and see the luxury apartments of these sort of like richest of the rich, where you could literally go into, you know, you could go into Sushang's apartment, you could go into Tenenbaum's apartment, you could go into Sander Cohen's apartment, you know. And then conversely, we've got Apollo Square, where the lower class housing was, and it's sort of turned into this like dilapidated camp as a result of the Rapture Civil War. Point Prometheus, which is again, you know, you talk about the naming conventions, you know, this all works. It's a research facility. This is where the Little Sisters and the Big Daddies were created. Yeah, it's great. It's great stuff. I love, and all these locations have like clear imagery in your mind, right?
Yeah.
Where it's just burned in there, you know. Like you can just clearly visualize what they all look like. I want to talk about. You cannot have a conversation about Bioshock without 3 words, Todd. You know what 3 words I'm thinking of?
Of course.
What are they?
Would you kindly?
Would you kindly? So, yeah, you can't have a conversation about Bioshock without talking about Would You Kindly. Is it the greatest twist in video game history?
Possibly.
I can't think of any video game twist that could match that. So,
I remember when it like that shit comes out in the open, and I'm like thinking back, and I'm like, oh.
So Would You Kindly? So it is revealed that Jack, your player character, is actually Andrew Ryan's son. An illegitimate son that he has with his mistress, who sold Jack, your player character, was sold to Fontaine, who experimented on him and loaded him up with all kinds of like atom and plasmids, and actually sent him up to the surface and sort of injected him into society. And then later on, you know, caused him to age rapidly. Jack is actually only like a few years old.
Yep.
When the game takes place, even though he's like a 30-year-old man. They sort of work him into society, and then it turns out that when the plane crashes in the Atlantic, no, that was not on accident. It was orchestrated. The plane was hijacked so that Fontaine could have Jack come back to Rapture when he needed him, right?
Yep.
And it's all because he implanted a plasmid into Jack as a baby that used "would you kindly" as a trigger word. And essentially, the words "would you kindly" trigger you to do whatever they say. So, as it turns out, the guy that you have contact with, Atlas, over the radio throughout the entirety of the game, has been saying "would you kindly" this entire time. And they're so brilliant, the way that they pepper "would you kindly" into the game's dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
It is like just enough. It is like sprinkled just enough to where you would never pick it out. You know, you would never see it coming. But then when you think about it, you're like, oh my God, he has been saying "would you kindly" this entire time.
Yeah, that was my exact, like, I remember when it came out in the open, I'm like, oh shit, what?
And then it's always just something like, it's always innocuous. Just like, well, would you kindly pick up that wrench? Or would you kindly go to Neptune's bounty to get to my family? Or would you kindly do this or whatever? And until, like, finally, like, you know, it's revealed that Atlas is Frank Fontaine. And he's like, would you kindly go to Andrew Ryan's office and kill the son of a bitch? Right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's so interesting. That whole moment, that's such a fucking great cutscene. When you go up to Andrew Ryan's office and he explains, you know, that's when the plot twist of "would you kindly" is sort of explained to you. And the interesting thing about this game, and a lot of people, there's a lot to be made about the sort of like message about this game, both the, you know, the political message. This game is very much based on Atlas Shrugged, the Ayn Rand novel. I mean, you know, Atlas, you know, Andrew Ryan, Ayn Rand, you know, it's very, very much so based on that. And so there's a lot of like political parallels of like objectivism and isolationism and stuff like that. And the sort of like downfall of a completely libertarian society and stuff. That's all fine. I don't think that the game really like falls down yes or no on any of that. I think a lot of people are like, oh, this game proves that you can't have a libertarian society. It's like, I don't think the game really cares about that. I think the game more so uses it to paint a picture, because the point of the game wasn't necessarily that Andrew Ryan started a libertarian society. That wasn't really the point. The point was, it was Ryan's refusal to change. Like, everybody warned him about all these bad things that are happening, all the bad ideas, all the bad things that were going on. Ryan had plenty of opportunity to change and bend on his principles.
Yep.
And he didn't do it. You know, when he saw the way the atom market was changing, when he saw that the drug addiction was going on, he could have changed his principles, and he could have gotten help, and he could have done this or that, and he could have, you know, he even says in one of his last audio diaries, like, I shouldn't have been investing into these fucking stupid, the fisheries and stuff like that. I should have been focusing on the bigger picture, you know. But Andrew Ryan, at the end of the day, was a man of like just absolute stoic principle. He would not bend. He would not change. And in fact, when you go to his office to kill him, he lets you do it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, his whole mantra is a man chooses, a slave obeys, right?
Mm-hmm.
He will not be a slave. He will not bend. He has his ways and he will not change them, because that would make him a slave. So, brilliant stuff. It isn't until, so, you know, Fontaine is sort of revealed to be Atlas and sort of, you know, revealed to be the quote-unquote villain of the story. And that is where my second complaint with the game comes, because I don't think the game necessarily needed to go that route. It almost feels like the game was like, oh, fuck yeah, we have to end now. You know? Like, and so it ends in like a video game-ass boss fight. Like,
yeah, it's not good.
And it's kind of a little too, like, the game up until that point has been this like thoughtful experience and stuff like that, and then like you get to the end and it's just like, oh, like fucking, it's a video game boss fight. You know, it just feels out of place. And I think even Ken Levine, I've watched several talks with Ken Levine, and I think he even, like, that's his biggest regret with Bioshock, is doing that boss fight like that.
Still though, I mean, I respect that he even came out and like agreed with that.
Yeah, because it just feels out of place.
It
Ultimately,
does.
But
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like I'm rambling on. It's one of those things where I could just talk nonstop about Bioshock all day, but I don't know. I feel like I'm hogging the microphone. What are some things? What do you want to shout out? Shout out some stuff about Bioshock for the folks.
For me though, like it's actually one of my favorite moments is actually first getting in the lighthouse.
Yeah, yeah,
The first getting into the lighthouse, and the first thing you see is a statue of Andrew Ryan. It's like no gods or kings, only man.
right,
I love that shit.
right.
Absolutely love that.
It's a big statue of Andrew Ryan holding up this like banner that says "No gods or kings, only man." Yeah, and I love walking down the stairs and the lights coming on slowly.
But in a way, it's like you think about it, it's like the downfall of Rapture in a way was because of motherfuckers trying to be kings and gods.
Right. Yeah, I mean they got too big for their britches, right?
Yeah.
And it's sort of like the downfall of Rapture ultimately was based on Ryan's hubris, and it was based on him, it was based on him trying to create his own utopia, his own version of the world, and refusing to bend based on his principles. He thought that he had it figured out, right? Like it was his way or the highway, and if there was a problem, then like there's no, the problems are non-existent. This is my idea,
Yeah.
So he could have saw it all coming, and he could have ultimately could have stopped it, but
No, I'm pretty sure he saw it all coming, but again, it's just he's not going to change his.
he's not going to
change
bend.
his tune.
Yeah, he's not going to bend. Again, so powerful that when you finally go up to his office, he lets you just stick a fucking golf club in his head.
I remember it being really fucking brutal too.
It is because it takes like a few hits. Like you hit him and he's like, "Oh man, choose," and you like smack him with the golf club, and eventually, literally, like you stick the iron like into his head,
Yeah.
and he's just gushing blood, laying on the floor. Ugh, it's so good. I love this game, Todd.
It's. I absolutely love the game, but I forget how like dark and fucking gritty it can get with some of this shit.
Well, especially like when you dig into some of the backstory stuff, like I said, like the stuff with the little sisters, that is incredibly fucked up.
Oh, dude.
The big daddies are so fucked up, like the lengths that you have to go to sort of like become a big daddy, and you realize the process that all of these sort of like lower classmen had to go through when they were abducted and made into big daddies, having to get their tongues removed.
Yeah.
And stuff like that. Like, oh, it's brutal, dude. It's fucking, and it's incredibly fucking dark. And then, like, in Bioshock 2, they actually expand on that even further. And, man, I think you were saying you hadn't played Bioshock 2, right?
I haven't played it myself, but I do know the story of Bioshock 2.
You should really. I really recommend this
I
entire
have the
series.
collection. I have the collection, and I could easily do it.
You should, man. It's so good. Doing this retrospective makes me want to play Bioshock again.
It's putting me in a mood. it might be, honestly. It's like once well, at this point, at the time of this recording, Sekiro has not come out yet.
Right.
It's a few days away for me at this point.
Dude, you could do a Bioshock playthrough in a few days, dude.
I know. I definitely could. This is either how it's going to be. It's either I do it after I play Sekiro, and like when I have like a pretty dead period, because I don't know, after Sekiro, I don't even know what the fuck I'm going to give a shit about.
Or you could just play it now, Todd. You could just play it right here, right now. As soon as we get done recording, start up that Bioshock playthrough, Todd.
Oh, shit.
Man, I could go on and on. I love, part of me kind of wishes that I had like done another playthrough before, because I'm sure I could think of even more things to say about it. But I don't want to just spitball just random shit, because I could talk about the random things that I love. I could talk about the sound design. Just the sound design of the game is impeccable. Like when you hear the creaking and the groaning, you hear the sounds of the big daddies. Like you can tell when you're in the same room as a big daddy and you don't know where he is, right? The fucking footsteps,
I swear. That shit is like absolutely terrifying.
And you're just like, fuck, where is he? And like the hearing the little sisters in the distance. Come on, Mr. Bubbles. It's like, ugh, so good. It's all so good. The voice acting is so good. There's a good parallel. Spoilers for Bioshock Infinite, I guess. There's a good parallel between... They sort of telegraph the fact that the games are linked, because when you first arrive in Rapture and that spider splicer is like above your like on top of your bathysphere, and what's the first thing she says? She's like, is it someone new? The first words you hear when you arrive in Columbia are the same thing.
Yeah.
Literally the first words, is it someone new? Oh, it's so good. It's all so good. It's so well thought out. I love it. I love it. Anyway, I feel like I have meandering thoughts, so I want to wrap it up.
You definitely are. No.
I'm not going to ramble any longer. Bioshock is so good. Please go play it. Hopefully you've already played it if you've made it this far, because if not, I've just spoiled the shit out of it for you.
Oh, you definitely spoiled the living shit out of it.
But if you have played it, play it again. It's worth it. It's really good. It's like one of those things where you just every so often you just have to revisit it and remind yourself of how good it is. And sitting here talking about it has definitely reminded me of how good Bioshock is. So, anyway, I love it. Anything else you want to add before we wrap it up, Todd?
I think that's about it.
Thanks for listening, guys. We'll catch you next week. Get fucking dunked on. Come back when you get some money, buddy. Bye.
See ya.
Hey there, thanks for checking out another fantastic Nerd Bourbon video. If you like what you saw and you want to see more, be sure to go ahead and subscribe, leave us a like, drop us a nice comment, or I guess a mean one if that's your prerogative. But until next time, get dunked on.